The episode archive of Your Creative Push is now easier than ever to navigate. Head to yourcreativepush.com and click episodes at the top. There you'll see all the episodes listed by date and by genre. Every episode of YCP is meant to inspire you, regardless of your creative passion, but you can now easily find the ones that fit your creative medium when you need a little extra push. Your Creative Push, episode 238.
The world will pull you in the directions that it wants to pull you if you don't stay focused on what you want.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I am your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Matthew Miller. Matthew is an active lifestyle artist whose work celebrates the human body in action and the mental states that go along with it. He is a retired rugby player, an ironman triathlete, and a fitness coach, which is his day job. And we had such a great conversation. We talked about a lot of things today, including the role that philosophy played in his life and dealing with insomnia and how that really affected him and eventually led him to the feeling of hitting rock bottom and what happened with his life and his creativity after that. We talked about the importance of writing out your perfect average day and the importance of journaling. One of the most powerful parts of this episode was the idea that artists shouldn't wait around for a gallery to find you or an audience to find you, and the importance of going out and creating your own opportunities, something that we don't think about often enough. And along those lines, Matthew talked about his discovery of live art and his experimentation and his plans to do live paintings at marathons and triathlons and other things like that. We also talked about a big one, his struggles of having a day job that he still actually enjoys, but he still wants to pursue his art full time and how he balances that. And of course, one of my favorite topics, he talks about flow state as it relates to both physical activity and as it relates to the art. And he gives his advice for people like you and me to experience flow state ourselves. These are just a few of the things we covered today. It's just exciting to sometimes speak to somebody who is in the trenches, who is smack dab in the middle of their creative journey. And he opens up and really lets us in to see that process. Just a down-to-earth guy with a great mentality. And I know that you're going to love this, my conversation with Matthew Miller. Enjoy. Matthew, welcome to the show, man.
Young man, I am super pumped to be here today.
Well, I'm very excited to meet you and to have you on the show, man. So I guess we could start like we usually do with you kind of giving us a brief bio, an origin story, kind of how you got to the point you are today.
Okay, it's kind of like a long, windy process. I'll try to get as short as I can.
No, you're good.
I was always drawn growing up, Ninja Turtles, sports scenes, and weird creatures I would come up with. And then when I got to high school, I actually took art. We had some pretty good art program there, and I took drawing, painting, and that was even when I picked up a set of oil paints and I started painting in my parents' basement when I was 15, 16 years old. Thought I wanted to go into it, but I kind of got burnt out by senior year and actually decided to take a little bit of a different path. So actually, for about the 12 years or so after high school, aside from, a couple periods where I would maybe take a class for fun here and there, like I would say on average, I was painting 0 to 5 paintings per year, and that would be, it's Mother's Day coming up and I'm short on cash. I'm going to paint my mom like a flower, it's something boring like that. And it wasn't until later that I really got started, but to back it up just a little bit, what I ended up doing is in high school, actually, I was exposed to some philosophy in a particular class that I took, and I started realizing this was the first time in my life where I was really taught how to think instead of what to think, and realized there's all these tools for thinking more critically about like, what does it mean to be a good person, to live a good human life? And I just thought, basically, I made the realization that like ideas matter, values matter, principles matter, and thinking about these things, using them to guide your life is super important. And I thought, I want to be a philosophy professor. So I went to college, studied philosophy, got in a PhD program because I wanted to be a professor. And along the way, I guess I'm 32 now, so it's been like 10 years since I graduated college. Been kind of all over the place, in and out of grad school. I got a master's in philosophy. Ultimately realized that the academic life wasn't really for me. I mean, the thing that I was studying and obsessing over were those very questions about what does it mean to live a meaningful human life? And I kind of realized that being in academia and stuck behind a book and all that stuff wasn't really going to do it for me. And so at that point, I got certified as a personal trainer, and I moved to Chicago to try to build a fitness career. But also, so this is where we get a little more into art. Is one interesting fact about me, I guess it's interesting. I had seizures when I was a kid, and I was medicated for them for a long time until a few years ago. And when I stopped taking these prescription pills for seizures, I didn't have any seizures, so I'm like fine as far as that goes. But I guess when you put these pills in your body for so long, kind of gave me some really bad insomnia for a really long time that I actually still kind of struggle with. And so, like I said, I had moved to Chicago. I got this fitness job, and a really bad sleep period kicked in, and probably one of the most challenging times in my life where I'm just trying to keep this job, trying to pay rent in an expensive apartment in Chicago, and I'm not sleeping. I'm a mess. So that's when I started doing a lot of like self work on myself. A lot of journaling, a lot of listening to positive audio, whether that's Tony Robbins programs or just random things you can find on YouTube, and just was writing and just trying to trying to find myself or figure out like what the heck's going on. Like, I want to be happy. Like, what should I do? And one thing that I did during this period was I found this activity called, I guess it's like you just write out your perfect average day. And I think this is something that a lot of creative people and successful entrepreneurs do when they're trying to build a lifestyle. One thing that just kind of kept coming up through a lot of these journaling exercises for me is like art. That was something that I'd always like kind of done. And it was always like in the back of my head is like, when the time's right, I'm going to really go for it and try to make this art thing work. And then, but next thing you know, I'm 30. I hadn't done it. And to be honest, like it was the worst time. Like I was actually at rock bottom in my life, which maybe that's the right time. Maybe rock bottom is the time. You got nothing else to lose. Might as well pursue an art career. So I'm doing all this work on myself, but I'm still struggling with sleep issues. And it really got to the point where I could not go to work anymore and enough to afford to live in Chicago. And so I ultimately had to spend a few months living in my parents' basement because I just needed a rest. I was in a bad place. And that's when I didn't have anything else to do. I didn't have any job or any money at this point. And so I just found all my old paints from high school and I started painting a lot. And then, so like I said, there's a 12-year period where I was painting 0 to 5 paintings a year. And then all of a sudden, I think it was like September 19th of 2015, I couldn't sleep and I was like, screw this. And I just painted something. And from that day forward, I think I did over 100 paintings in the next year.
Whoa.
And it just, since then, it's just been, I paint very fast and that's kind of my style. So that it's maybe sounds more impressive than it really is. But I was, from that period forward, like it's consistent. I'm painting not every day, but especially with not having like studio space and living in a tiny apartment, but I'm painting a lot, 3-4 times a week. And I don't know, like I did a lot of work on myself and I like made a shift in my mind and like all of a sudden, like, boom, like I'm painting all the time. And I'm this artist dude. And so actually after a couple months of living in my parents' basement, I kind of realized like, man, like I got to get myself out of here. I'm going to die in this basement. And so I moved to Denver actually. So I've been in Denver about 1.5 years. And when I got here, I was living in my friend from college, his mom would rent out rooms of her house to like younger people because it's such a transition city where there's a lot of young people coming and going. And so I was living in this like a bedroom in her basement for a while. Couldn't really paint much. But one Saturday night I was out at a show, like just like a local venue, small venue, local bands playing. And there's a bunch of people in the corner painting pictures. And I'm like, what in the world? There's all these artists here painting at a show. And so I asked one of the guys about it and like, yeah, like this is pretty common in Denver and a lot of other places. And like, you should get a hold of this guy if you want to do it. And so I did. And like a couple Mondays, like it was like, there's like this Monday night event here in Denver where it's a lot of local bands play, artists come. And it's kind of like one of those, kind of like got a little bit of a hippie feel to it, like hippie chicks with hula hoops dancing around and artists. And it's a lot of fun. And so I started doing that. And for like every Monday for a few months, I was going out. Like that was my studio time, was I would go to this little venue and set up and paint, and all kinds of really friendly people there. It was a very encouraging environment. And so I'm this dude who like just a few months before, like just kind of started painting again. And next thing you know, like I'm out in public painting pictures and showing my art, and just a lot of things like that happened here in Denver, like just opportunities to show your art at these First Friday art walks and just like particular communities that are just super welcoming. And with doing live art, like I didn't know what live painting really was. And a lot of people will do it as part of their marketing. Like if you're going to set up a table and try to sell prints and stuff like that, like it's cool if you also are like painting a picture at the same time to kind of like show what you do. But I thought it was like supposed to be a performance. And so I was like planning this big, like I got a canvas like twice the size of anything I ever painted. And I painted Einstein's portrait, and it happened to be Einstein's birthday that day. And I was like, I hammered this thing out in just like 2 or 3 hours, which isn't super quick, but like people saw me show up with a blank canvas. And then by the end of the night, I had this painting finished up. It turned out kind of cool. And I kept getting invited back for stuff like this. And it just kind of like snowballed from there. Like I think I remember even like writing down at some point, like, I want to get paid to do this and like do this on stage. I want to be a performance painter. And then I learned that like there are a lot of people who do that sort of thing. And basically over the last year, I've found more opportunities to do that and show my art. And so that's really how I like really got into it, is first of all, doing a lot of work on myself and making the decision, writing it down, rewriting it. I am an artist. It's almost manic, the kind of journaling that I would do. But honestly, I think that's what it takes to keep going as hard as it is out there. And then also I did happen to find a lot of opportunities, but it was also a matter of taking initiative. To a lot of times, like I would just look online and see like, are there any shows tonight, or what sort of parties and events are happening around town? And I would try to get a hold of the host or the venue and ask them if I could paint. And like a lot of times they would say yes. And a lot of really cool stuff happened just because I have this talent that I can like bring out in public and people enjoy it. And it's actually like led me to a lot of like really fun opportunities and things like that. And so that's my story.
Awesome, man. There's a lot of things I want to get to with what you just said, but I guess we'll first start out with what you were just talking about finding those opportunities and kind of making opportunities for yourself and being really proactive as opposed to waiting for things to kind of fall on your lap. It's like actively looking for places to go or people to meet or new opportunities for yourself.
Yeah, and honestly, what I'm realizing, I think it's especially the case with, I'm definitely not using the internet and social media the way that I need to, and that's kind of like the next phase of my career, is to figure out all that kind of stuff. But I think as an artist struggling, you're not going to get discovered by some gallery and then they're just going to take over all your sales. I'm not waiting around for anybody to do that. And I think you need to create your own opportunities. And I've done that a little bit with the live painting because that's kind of been my strategy. Like here's an example of a success is there was a bunch of local bands were doing a James Brown tribute concert here in town. And so I got permission to paint there. I painted a James Brown painting. By midnight, I had $300 in my PayPal account, and I met a lot of cool people that night, so like just kind of like strategizing in that way and just creating your own opportunities. There's so many places that value art and think having art shows is very cool. So instead of waiting around for some gallery or something like that to like invite you to show your stuff or competing against all these other artists trying to get into a particular show, why not make your own and find a venue that is like perfect for your niche, or like where does my art really fit in, and create a show there. And it might be somewhere where there's not even any other art, and so you're not even competing with anyone. And I wonder, and I kind of wonder today, is I grew up in a much different generation. I remember being in high school and having to like ask girls to write their phone number on my hand, and then I have to like call her house and like ask her dad's permission to speak with her. Like I had to go through all this, and I think there might be a younger generation of people in general, but also artists who maybe didn't have to do that, and they're so used to digital communication that I think maybe a lot of people are overlooking the power of showing up somewhere, shaking someone's hand, looking them in the eye, and introducing yourself.
Right.
And that can work wonders.
Yeah, just that power of that one-on-one communication.
Mm-hmm.
It's sometimes terrifying, like to do that, to put yourself out there, but it's like also the most effective way to communicate with people and to show people what's up. Yeah, for sure. And I guess one story I have is when I started painting, I wanted to do a lot of sports art. And so I was going on Instagram, like looking for sports artists, and I found a bunch that I liked. And I realized that there was one that was local. And so I went to where he was having a show. Like it was like a little charity thing at a children's hospital. And I went and I introduced myself. I was like, hey man, I love your art. It's awesome. I'm like, and this was this was during that period when I was at my parents' house and I was just kind of getting started. And I told him, and I was like, hey, I'm like thinking about getting into this. And the guy was so encouraging, and he was like, oh yeah, there are these local showcases, and yeah, the guy's over there that can like get you set up with this. So he introduced me to another guy at this thing. And then like within 10 minutes, like I have my first show. It's not a big deal. It's like 3 paintings with like 30 other artists in this little thing. But I got out there, showed my stuff, and I met several other artists at this event and became friends with them, and just things start happening when you take an action and put yourself out there. Absolutely. And another really powerful thing that you're talking about, and I think it's probably one of the best advice that I can give to other artists, and something that I try to promote on this show that people don't really think about too often. It's that traditional path that a lot of artists take. They think that to be a quote artist, you have to get into this gallery or that gallery. But I think it's way more powerful and way easier to find your own path, kind of like you're doing, to find your own opportunities, to find your own audience that's not necessarily looking for art, but you put yourself in front of them and they realize that they have to have your art, as opposed to like being amongst a bunch of other artists trying to sell your work, and then you're just another painting, you're just another artist. But if you can do what you're doing and just put yourself into a scenario where there's no other artists around, they weren't expecting to see an artist, and they weren't expecting to have this piece that they're watching you do, I think that's like really, really powerful.
Yeah, the way I think of it is I try to make art as much of an emotional, impulsive decision as possible.
Yeah.
And it works out sometimes.
Right. Well, you've talked about this on the Facebook group a little bit, that you're thinking about doing this. I don't know if you have done this yet, where you're doing live paintings at your runs, because you're a triathlete, or used to be. Is that right?
Yeah, well, so I actually used to do Ironman triathlons. I played rugby, and my day job is in fitness. So I'm a group fitness instructor and personal trainer. I love it. I'm just as obsessed with that stuff as I am with art, and it's kind of tough to juggle these. And I wonder if sometime I might need to like maybe focus on one. But anyways, when I first started, when I did that, write out your perfect day activity and like envision your future, I want to be an artist kind of stuff. Like I wanted to be a sports artist. Like, and I remember writing down, like, I want to do like stylish paintings that celebrate the human body in motion. And that's what I started doing. But along the way, when I came to Denver and I started painting at these shows and doing the live painting stuff, I kind of like, and it was my first year or so I'm just still experimenting, figuring out what I'm good at. And I got into a lot of other different kinds of art, did a lot of portraits. Sometimes I would go and like paint a band while they played and try to sell it to them or something like that. But anyways, like I realized like that like was a lot of fun, but it wasn't me. And, I said earlier, it's really important to like, think about like your values, your identity, and like live accordingly. And so I thought like, this isn't really my scene. This isn't the art that I like really set out to do. And so like now I'm like, I've kind of at this point where like going to those like nightclubs to paint is exhausting. The hours suck, especially like if you have to train people at 5 a.m. after. And so I realized that like I need to let that go. And what I want to do is do the same sort of thing, but at like an Ironman triathlon or a marathon. And so there was an Ironman in Boulder a couple of weeks ago that kind of last second I decided to go paint at, and the course and everything wasn't perfect for that, but I did a little painting on the run course and talked to some people while I did it. A couple of weeks I'm actually going to be doing a race in Boulder. It's a triathlon. I'm going to paint the swim stars. So I'll do like a swim painting. And then I'll just be there, like just vending, selling my art, handing out some cards, because my idea is, a lot of those people who do those events, like those are super important to them, a lot of sentimental value, and people shell out lots of money for hats and t-shirts, and they get those like race photos that you can pay $30 for a little print of. And my idea is like, what, better than like some piece of merchandise mass produced, like how about an original painting or maybe a custom painting of you crossing the finish line or something like that. And so that seems like what I'm really aiming for is like, first of all, I think that's a more promising direction to go, because I think those people have a little more money than the people at little concert venues, but also like I feel good doing that. Like this art that I'm making, like I'm looking at some of the, I've started to do more triathlon and sports art paintings, and I'm still working on my skills, but I'm looking at some of these and I'm like, you know what? Like I'm thinking back to 2 years ago, what I wrote down, and I'm like, I'm starting to create art that fulfills that vision. Like I'm doing what I set out to do a long time ago, and it feels pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. And my wife and I were talking about this too. She runs, and
cool.
I'm always there at the races. Someday I'll get back into running. I used to be into running, but anyway, I'm always there too, and we're always hanging out afterwards. They usually have like a band playing and all kinds of other like stations set up. Yoga or whatnot, or you can pick up your pictures, stuff like that. I just think I just imagined like a painter being there. I know she would, or I would buy a painting of her if you can somehow find a way to get that race photo involved, or maybe like you could be painting old commissions like in front of them so they can see like what you do and like how you do it, and then be like, all right, as soon as you get your picture, send it to me, and then I'll do it at the next race I'm at. And then I don't know, there's just a lot of opportunities, but I know for a fact that like people are very excited and proud of themselves, especially right after a race, of what they just accomplished. And like you said, it's something great for them. It's like a great memento, way better than a photo, you know what I mean? A painting of themselves doing what they, went out to achieve and successfully achieved in this race or marathon or triathlon or whatever it is. And just to be able to do that for them, it'd be so, it's just amazing.
Yeah. So that really, what you just explained is kind of the strategy, but obviously like taking that somewhat vague vision and actually like hammering out like a nice plan, because I am at the stage where the last year it's all been about like just paint more. Like I didn't want to worry about the business side of things until I knew that I had like the quality of work and the consistency and work ethic to keep up with like any sort of demand. And now I'm looking back and I'm like, I'm there. So I think I owe it to myself to get some of those other ducks in a row in terms of the marketing and business and all that kind of stuff. And so like this race endeavor is kind of my way of like trying to hone in on a niche and try to get systematic about things and try to get smart about, you got to make some money doing this stuff if you want to keep doing it, because those canvases ain't cheap
Right.
to keep picking up and painting on every few days or so.
Right. Oh, I love that. And is that like a scary point for you then to be at that point? Because I know for me, especially earlier and before this podcast, like a lot of the excuses I would make would be, one day I'll get to that when I have the skills to do that, or one day I'll do that once I have a certain amount of audience or whatever. And I know that then when that point comes where you're kind of self-reflecting and realizing that you're at that point that you've been kind of putting off until, it's kind of scary, because then you're like, all right, got to do it. So do you have those kind of same feelings like at this point?
It's actually funny, is like, it's actually hard for me, like when I have free time, because I'm working a couple jobs and time and energy are tough to come by at times. But when I do have time lately, like I'll be like, all right, I'm going to paint, and I'll set it up and do a painting. And then I'll realize, like, do you really, like, you have a lot of art out there that isn't sold. Do you really need to work on adding to that collection, or should you be working on some other stuff? So actually, like, doing the creative thing is kind of like my resistance or my way of procrastinating, like, sitting down in front of a computer and figuring out how to integrate email lists into my website and devising, like, instead of just posting on social media kind of willy-nilly, like set a plan and just kind of get all that taken care of. And so, yeah, there is a lot of resistance. I tend not to be good at that stuff. And also, like, I just have a lot of trouble with social media and like putting myself out there and being showy. And I don't know, I'm sure a lot of artists have a lot of hangups about that sort of thing. And I need to get over it. It's something I need to work on, and because it's not going to work out if I don't start working on those things. And probably the biggest thing is actually like, so I currently live in Denver, which is not cheap to live in. I work another job that I'm pretty into, and it takes a lot of time and energy doing that too. I'm at a point where I realize, like, I might have hit a plateau with art. With as hard as I've been working, I might need to like restructure my life in such a way that I have more time, money, and energy to devote to art to really make it work. And if I don't, I might be, a year from now, I'm like still turning my wheels and still trying to like run around, like going to clubs and sell painting, which was a great like boot camp for the first year of my art career. But it's not something I want to do for a long time, and so I might need to let go of some things, or, move somewhere cheaper or change jobs. And these are things I'm kind of wrestling with in my brain as we these days.
Because I was going to ask you like how you have been balancing. You said you have 2 jobs?
Yeah, so I have a job in fitness, which is it's a real passion of mine. I'm real into it. It's very rewarding. And another one, I picked a part-time job in a rug selling and delivering these vintage rugs, and it's not a passion of mine, but
so that's first to go.
yeah. Well, with the art pursuit, it's been up and down. Like there have been times where I make more money off of art this month than I did in my fitness job, or it's the opposite. And so I realized with that inconsistency, I had to pick up another job just to have consistent income coming in. But then now I'm like struggling with finding the time to put into art. And I'm realizing that that's what I really want to go all in on now. And so, I'm sure I'm not the only person dealing with these struggles.
Right.
And that's the trick is it is important. You got to survive and be able to buy supplies. But man, it's so hard not to get sucked into a position where you don't have the time to do it, and you're using your energy on other things. And so it's an ongoing struggle to, and like one thing to like really keep in mind is like the world will pull you in the directions that it wants to pull you if you don't stay focused on what you want and who you are. And that's kind of what happened over the last year or so with my art, is like I had a lot of fun, no regrets, but ultimately I realized I was like, oh, this isn't what I set out to do with like painting for this environment and painting this kind of stuff. Like I really wanted to do this. And so now I'm like in the process of like trying to rein everything in, like, all right, let's shift directions. Let's set a new plan, reinforce kind of that initial vision that I had a couple of years ago.
Right. Like you said, it is a constant battle, and bravo to you for continuing to fight the fight. And maybe we'll check in like a year or so and see like which kind of path you were able to get down in order to get to that point.
Yeah, we'll have a revisit episode where I'll be boasting about my massive success in about a year or two. So I look forward to that.
We will. No, but it is also important to hone in for people that have started to go down that path. And like you said, the world will pull you in whatever direction it wants to pull you in. But to try to keep that thesis statement in mind always, like, and to get back to it. And it is okay if it does pull you in a different direction. If you dig it, if you like where it's pulling you and you didn't expect to go in this other direction, that's totally fine. But to always kind of keep your mind active and not getting sort of sucked down that path, if that makes sense, to always kind of just be, reevaluating and kind of readjusting to get to the point that you want to get to. I also wanted to get into kind of talking about sports or an active lifestyle, how important that is to you. You actually define yourself as an active lifestyle artist. So I was wondering, could you talk about the importance of the active lifestyle, and then also maybe how the flow state that you get into when you're kind of active relates to the flow state that you can get into while you're painting?
Okay, yeah. I mean, this is kind of my way of like, this is a lot of things in my life are just like kind of like culminating a lot of passions. I look back at my past of like studying philosophy, of being an endurance sport athlete, and being an artist now. I'm like trying to bring all these things in together. I'm also like a big nerd. Like I said, I was in a PhD philosophy program. I was taking classes that even dabbled in like neuroscience and psychology. And so I was ultimately going to write a dissertation on flow states, on them being like this crucial component of a meaningful human life. Just finding activities that put you in the zone, that make you feel like you are your best, you feel authentic, you're living your values, you feel alive when you're doing these things. It's different for everyone. It could be knitting, it could be running, it could be yoga, whatever. But those sorts of things are, I don't know, I think they're crucial to finding any meaning in your life, whether it's your career or you carve out time to make it as a hobby. Ultimately, like I used to do a lot of ironman triathlons and endurance sports. I played rugby in college, beat the crap out of my body. And right now I'm at a point where the last few years, I haven't really been able to run or do anything super intense. And looking back in hindsight, just thinking of the sleep problems that I've had, like kind of dealing with some depressive episodes and anxiety and things like that. My hypothesis is that when I stopped doing all those physical activities, that's when some of these maybe problems started to kick in. And with painting, obviously I picked it up during like one of the most challenging times of my life. And sometimes I wonder like how things could have turned out if I didn't pick up a paintbrush. And so like that art is like almost like filling that hole in my soul, that, and I think it goes for a lot of people, and not just for your average person to like have a fulfilling life, but I'm just thinking of so many people who struggle with depression and all kinds of other, even just overly stressed about their life. And if you're just constantly like just battling traffic and going to jobs that you hate and stressing out and then throwing on CNN and watching the news, and you're never like escaping that, finding that activity, because honestly, like what's beautiful about those flow states is what happens in your brain is like that frontal part of your brain that like, that's where it's very valuable, because that's the part of your brain that helps you like plan for the future. And it like keeps you in touch with like, the social norms and rules of your society, so that you can like have executive function over your behavior. And it's very valuable in that ways, but it's the same thing that makes you stress about the future and like stress about having to conform to certain things. And that part of your brain shuts down when you're painting or running or whatever it is. And so like that inner chatter shuts up. You don't even like all that other stuff does not exist anymore. Bills, your job that you're stressed out about, whatever it is, like what are you doing later for dinner? Like that is like completely absent, and you're just like so dialed into what you're doing. And not only like, I'm sure like a lot of people just need that freaking escape, but also like that's like meditation, because you're putting your brain into a completely different state. And so you do more of that, and you kind of train yourself to maybe be a little more focused or relaxed, or, having that outlet makes the rest of your life go a little bit better too. That's why I'm painting what I'm painting now is a lot of these more active scenes, not just to celebrate, like I'm not just want to be like a sports artist and this is my favorite player, my favorite team, but like this is the human body in motion, and this person is, in a different state of being while they're moving. And that's kind of what I want to convey with my art.
Yeah, and I think you are very effective with that attempt. And just going back to the flow state thing, I think that's why the best advice that I can give to people to just start, because like you said, that prefrontal cortex or whatever it is, that the planning part of your brain will kick into high gear when you start to think about sitting down and painting, or sitting down and getting to your music, or sitting down and writing and being vulnerable and putting yourself out there. It's like, whoa, are you sure you want to do that? Like, what about this? And what will happen after this? And is this an effective use of your time? Because you won't make money, or blah, 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 all of that bullshit. Like, to be able to kind of just start and not let all that planning and worrying kick in, or have enough time to kick in, and just starting so that you can ease into that flow state, so that you can start to forget about all that stuff and meditate, like you're saying, and kind of take a break from your own thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think seeing it as this intrinsically valuable activity is a crucial insight to like stay consistent or even get started. And it's the same thing with exercise. Is if you're thinking I have 50 pounds to lose, I got to keep going to this gym and eating broccoli for however long until I get there. This sucks. But if you can focus on, I enjoy moving my body, I feel good when I'm exercising and eating healthy, like just on a day-to-day basis, I feel better. Then you forget about the fact that like you got a long ways to go to hit your goal, because you're just enjoying the process. And I think the same thing goes with art, is like, I'll tell you what, that money's going to come sooner or later. I'm going to get there. But right now, even though I'm struggling, it's tough, I have this activity that I'm regularly engaging in that is just adding like so much value to my life that words can't even describe. Like the lows can get pretty low, but gosh darn it, the highs are pretty high, like nothing I've ever experienced ever since I started doing art.
Absolutely. Well, would you have any advice then for us to get to that flow state? People that have trouble to get to that state, whether it's in physical activity or with their art?
The first thing is like, you can't be distracted. So like having your phone around, like we're living in a world that every force surrounding you is preventing you from getting into a flow state. We're living in a world that is just trying to grab your attention. So obviously, like, leave your phone off, get it out. But also, like, I'm a big believer in like the mind-body connection. And in the past, like sometimes if I go for a run, like I'll do some breathing exercises or some meditation beforehand to like try to get into a runner's high better. Or one thing I just started doing the last week or so is I've always been very interested in like this new direction that a lot of people in the health and fitness world are going with, like taking ice baths and doing stuff in saunas and like these like breathing techniques. And like, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Wim Hof, the Iceman. And there's another guy I just signed up for a program with it's called Power Speed Endurance with a guy named Brian McKenzie and Rob Wilson write these programming. And I get these breathing exercises to do like in the morning, something to do during my workout, and at night. And I'm feeling such different. I'm getting like body buzzes when I do some of these exercises. And I'm also feeling so much more focused because of it. And what I realized is like, all this breathing exercises and like, I don't know, like trying to like force myself to sit in a cold bathtub for longer and longer every time. Like it's like meditation. And I'm starting, like I've always struggled to meditate and sit still, but this new activity I'm doing is really helping. And so, honestly, just think of like, are you eating healthy? Are you eating junk food all the time? That affects your brain and how well you can focus and feel good. And are you exercising, breathing? And so I think there's a lot of, and I think more artists are coming around to this, is that just taking care of yourself physically, your physical body and brain is going to translate into like more creativity and more productivity in the long run.
Very cool. And we'll link some of those resources that people can check out if they want to try out that stuff at the show notes page today at yourcreativepush.com/Matthew Miller. And recently in the Facebook group, you shared a painting that you did where you kind of juxtaposed the human body in action with the associated neurochemical. So can you talk about that piece as well as kind of what you're planning on doing with that series? Because I think it's so cool.
Yeah, and this might be like a super specialized niche that I'm going toward, which is like neuroscientists who also dabble in extreme sports. But so basically with these activities that put your brain into a certain state, I've done several artworks where I'll have the person and like some molecule built into the background. My idea came from, there's a lot of people who are doing similar things, but it's with like, they'll put a mushroom in there or like an LSD molecule or something like that. It's kind of in that like psychedelic genre of art, which is all good and well. Like we're all like, I think it's natural to seek altered states. And, but what I think with my approach and my philosophy on things, like what I'm trying to celebrate is this more natural high, which is very possible to achieve through exercise or breathing or what have you. And so I want to kind of like do my twist on that genre. And so one painting I did recently was a free climber. So that's someone who climbs rocks without any ropes or support. His name's Dean Potter. He actually died in a wingsuit accident a couple of years ago. He's featured in a book that kind of changed my life. It's called The Rise of Superman. It's all about flow states and how important they are for, like, that state of mind actually improves your performance, your focus, your hand-eye coordination, things like that. And so he was featured in this book, and I remember it seemed like a lot of the people who are doing this kind of stuff is kind of like, I resonated with it because it seemed like they were trying to fill some hole in their soul, or sitting still wasn't really cutting it, and so they got to like go do these extreme things to kind of get into that state. And so I thought I would do a painting of Dean Potter, this free climber, climbing a mountain, and in the background is like a chemical structure that's kind of shared by this family of neurochemicals of catecholamine. So that's neuroepinephrine, epinephrine, and dopamine, and those are the chemicals that really like sharpen your focus and kind of get you amped up for action. And particularly dopamine, like that's kind of associated with like motivating you towards like some reward, and it's definitely associated with addiction as well. And I kind of think of it in that way too, is like, these activities are similar to an addiction, like they're helping fill some hole in your soul. But even though, I guess they can be pretty risky, but they're less risky, smarter, healthier things that you can do to fill that hole, or there are healthier addictions that you can have. This whole message that I'm talking about today, about the importance of finding those activities and that's kind of what I'm trying to say with my art. And I'm hoping to put a series together with some different people and different neurochemicals and see where that goes. But that's just kind of my way of like, that's my art, you know, I'm like the science philosophy geek who also likes to be active, and I'm just cramming it all together in like one package.
Right, and that's what every artist should do. Every person should do with their kind of life and their creativity, is to mash it all together. Everything that interests you, find a way to incorporate it all together, and that's what I really like about this new series that you're doing. And I can't wait to see more of it, man.
Cool, thanks.
Absolutely. And before we kind of move on, I wanted you mentioned something before that I think is really important. I was wondering if you could maybe expound on it a little bit more about your journal activities and like writing stuff down. So I was wondering maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
This is something that I think like maybe I think a lot of artists are probably doing it, but I definitely know a lot of like entrepreneurs are doing this kind of stuff, and people who are like designing these alternative lifestyles to go like live their dreams and stuff like that. But I think it's especially important for artists to be very aware of protecting what goes into your mind, because even the people who want you to succeed are still going to be those voices that remind you of the starving artist myth, that remind you how hard it is, that want you to like think realistically. They're the ones who are going to tell you maybe you should do cat portraits instead of this other cool thing that you really want to do. And those people have a lot of weight in your life too. Like you're going to take them very seriously. And so you need to engage in things to replace those messages with the positive, empowering ones, whether that's writing "I am an artist" over and over and over, or writing out your perfect day. So like, what does your perfect average day look like? What are you doing? What kind of art are you doing? Who do you spend time with? What's on your nightstand when you wake up in the morning? How does all these details? And if you write out like just what your life would be like in like 5 years if it was perfect, and you read it every day, it's just going to plant these seeds in your brain, and you're going to start slowly shifting in that direction. It happened to me. And one other thing that I did is one day I just decided to write a list of all of my peak experiences, like times when I was in a flow state, or maybe it was like a class that I really liked in college, or like what sports did I play growing up, or what people like bring out the best in me, favorite memories, when did I laugh a lot, what are the best conversations. Just made a list of like all these like great experiences from my life. And then just spend 20, 30 minutes going over it. And you start to like, you look at this list and you'll see trends. And you can either see, wow, these things are like, my life right now looks nothing like this stuff. Maybe I need to make a change, you know? And that was an activity that I did in like 2014. And I just made all these realizations that like what I was doing at the time wasn't really like making me feel alive. And there was these other things, and honestly, years and years and years of journaling and doing stuff like that is like what always kept coming up is like art was always there, and I just had to do it. And so you do these, honestly, like the journaling that I do, it's really just like a conversation I'm having with myself, where I'm making lists and setting goals and just reflecting on things. And if you review these every now and then, you see like the same stuff will keep coming up and coming up and coming up. And like, you got to pay attention. Right. And eventually you're going to start making changes.
For sure. And what would you say that your perfect average day is now?
Well, you know, so I did the activity a couple of years ago. I was in Chicago. That was when I was having sleep issues. I wasn't painting. I was working in fitness. And in this scenario that I originally created was I was living in a mountain town. And as I described it, I had like 1 foot in the fitness community, 1 foot in the art community. And I was doing fitness art and sports art and just kind of living this great lifestyle, like in the mountains, like had free time during the day. I'm not certain that like I ultimately still want to end up in the mountains, but I'm in Denver, like pretty close to the mountains. Yeah. And like, this was kind of like, I came out here as like, this is like a step to like getting into a small, like once I get established, maybe I'll like settle in like a smaller mountain town where it's a little more simple. I do like in this scenario, like I was doing a painting to give to my friend who owns a gym. And I've sold a lot of art to my fitness clients. And so like it's not like I've been like reading this perfect day thing every morning for 2 years. I read it for like 2 months, and I kind of got discouraged and stopped looking at it for a while. But I guess that was enough to plant some seeds where my life started shifting. And I'm actually at the point right now where like I need to revisit that and shift some things around. After putting in 2 years, I can revise it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think that that's the real takeaway there is that I think people sometimes, maybe somebody that's listening to this podcast now, it's like you consume material that motivates you and stuff. In the back of your head, you're like, all right, this is like, I'm somewhat taking steps towards this thing that I want that you haven't clearly defined yet. And I think it takes that definition, that whether it's writing it down or saying it out loud or telling people about it, or continuing to write about it or continuing to tell people about it, you need to say it out loud and express it to the universe, and to just kind of tell it to yourself as well, to figure out what it is actually that you want. And that's sometimes all it takes, is that really admitting it in order to take those steps to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew, it's time for the final push. And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions.
I mean, honestly, just to go back to what I was just talking about with some of these activities, and don't go by what I do, but find what works for you. Everybody learns things differently. Everyone stays motivated by different things. What motivates you? Like, what is the activity that's going to help you get clear on what you want, whether that's writing your list of peak experiences or doing the perfect day activity. If you want to find out more about that, there's tons of videos online about how to actually go about that. And then honestly, I think the trick after that is like find a regular practice that works for you, that you can remind yourself every day who you are, what you want out of your life, and just continue day after day. And this isn't something that I'm perfect at either. And I can, when I look back on like the last couple of years of this, there's been like some ups and downs, and even just in like my general happiness levels are all over the place. And I can probably say that like when I lose sight of this stuff, if I'm not writing stuff down and putting positive things into my brain, that's when like things start to slow down and I start to get discouraged. But then once I get back on with that stuff, like I feel better, I start making better decisions, being more productive. And so honestly, I think like it might seem silly that if there's like a particular audio, video, or podcast or anything that kind of pumps you up, like it sounds silly to say, listen to it every day, write this same stuff down every day, because that is what it takes. Like I said, the world has other plans for you, and our environment is set up to like take you out of your flow state and distract you. And it's a lot of work to keep your eyes on the prize. And so do the work.
Perfect advice, man. And I really do appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing some of your philosophy as being a former philosophy major about life and really motivating us today.
Yeah, glad to be here. It was a good time.
And you can find Matt on his website, which is MatthewMillerArt.com. On Facebook, he is Matthew Miller Art. And on Instagram, he is matt.moves. We'll have that as well as everything else we talked about today linked up at today's show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/Matthew Miller. Matthew, thanks again, man.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me.
My thanks again to Matthew for coming on the show. Such a nice guy. And it's fun to have guests like Matthew on the show who are kind of right in the trenches, who are right in the middle of their own resistances or right in the middle of their own creative processes as they're figuring it out on the fly. Because sometimes those kinds of people really bring up some amazing points. And one of the best pieces of advice that he gave was to be proactive, to go out there and to get those opportunities for yourself. I can't stress how important that is and how game-changing that is if you can figure out how to make those opportunities for yourself in your own art. It is a very hard thing to get through your own creative blocks, and you should be applauded if you are using this podcast to help you or doing it on your own, finding ways to get past your self-doubt, past your procrastination or whatever it is that holds you back on a daily basis, and you're able to create from within you and bring a piece of you into the world with your art. And you should be applauded for that. However, that does not mean that people are going to come flocking to your art. You're not going to build an audience just because of the fact that you made this thing. If you want to have this be a sustainable career for yourself, if you want to actually make money from this thing or find ways to make your creativity be more of a viable part of your own life, then you have to find opportunities for yourself to put yourself out there and to earn some money from your art. And like Matthew was saying, that doesn't necessarily mean signing up for, shows or trying to get into galleries or doing everything else that every other artist is already trying to do because they think that's the right path. That is a crowded space. You need to find your own niche, your own opportunities. And sometimes that is scary. Sometimes it means that you have to put yourself out there in places where people don't expect to see you. But if you're able to put yourself there and really believe in yourself and act like you're supposed to be there because you know that there is a market for you there, and you're essentially putting yourself in front of eyes of people that wouldn't scour the internet for you. They aren't going to come looking for you. You know that because if you build it, they won't come. If you can do that, then I think you can create an amazing existence for yourself. And I realize that this is not an easy piece of advice, something that you can just go and implement right now. It's going to require you to think. It's going to require you to use that creativity that I know that you have, but now you have to use that creativity in order to figure out a way to put yourself out there when out there isn't really clearly defined. But I think that Matthew's other piece of advice will really serve you well, to write down the goals of where you want to end up. And the more and more that you do that, the more you'll feel like it's a part of you, like you already have that thing. And we'll actually get into this more in depth next episode with Maria Brophy about the practicality of doing that. But from a magical universe type of standpoint, which you know that I love to take, the more that you're able to really tell yourself this over and over again, like Matthew was saying, every day, writing down your perfect average day, writing down exactly where you want to be a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line in your creative career. The more you're able to tell yourself this thing, the more you're going to believe it, the more you're going to actually feel like you already have it or that you will have it very soon. And I know that gets kind of woo-woo, but it's so important to do that because the more that you actually feel like that is you or will be you, the easier it will be for your brain to come up with ideas of where you need to be and what you need to do in order to get to that place. And you don't even need to do this over and over again for the rest of your life. You might just need to do it for a week, a month, a couple months. Just really start believing that you're going to be this thing. Really start writing down your ideas of where you want to be, and those ideas will start coming, I promise. You might be just like Matthew, and years after doing this activity, only a few times, be surprised at how closely your life resembles where you wanted to be when you started to do this activity. So just really great advice. And like I said, we're going to get into this next episode with Maria Brophy, who has been an art agent to her husband, Drew Brophy, very talented artist who does surfboard art. And she's also a business consultant to creative entrepreneurs since 2009. She has this book called Art, Money, and Success, which I read, and I highly recommend if you are wanting to be a professional artist, if you're wanting to make money from your art, but you don't know where to go because it's this giant puzzle and you don't even know where to start. She lays it out for you, I'm telling you. And I had such a wonderful talk with her. You can find her at mariabrophy.com, and on Instagram she is Maria Brophy. That's MariaBrophy. Or you can find links to her stuff, as well as everything we talked about today with Matthew at yourcreativepush.com/238. But that is all I've got for you today. Hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done. And we will be here for you on Thursday if you need the push again. I love you all. Go get some amazing work done, and we will see you next time. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.